Hi, Luis. This is Michael from BetterTOEFLScores.com. I'm listening to a speaking practice session you sent me a couple of days ago. I'm going to give you a score. I'll give you some specific feedback so you can kind of see where you are and how you can improve your delivery, language use, and topic development. I actually have the IBT rubrics here for the integrated speaking. And let's give me a quick second here. Okay, this is the actual transcript that you sent me. So it's a lecture in a psychology class talking about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So you know that extrinsic motivation is you do things because of some external award that you might get. And then the professor gives the example of the child who does small jobs around the house, like taking out the garbage or doing the dishes. And because she's given what we call an allowance or a small amount of money. And then the next one is intrinsic motivation. So in this case, it's motivation from within, internal desires to do things. And the professor gives the example about how he goes to the gym several times a week because he likes it. So he's motivated from within his own self to do that type of activity because he knows it'll make him healthy. And he must be good motivation because he's been doing it for the past 2 years. Okay, I got it. So now let's go back here and let's listen to your practice test now. Let's see how you did with it.
This lecture is mainly about two types of the motivation. The first one is extrinsic motivation, and the second one is intrinsic motivation. The first type, extrinsic motivation, is based on external feedback. We tend to praise other people to get accepted by them. The professor then gives the example of a child who does small jobs for that he or she does not enjoy doing just for receiving small amount of money from their parents. So the money is the motivation for them to keep doing the job. And this motivation does not last for long. The second one is intrinsic motivation, which is more long lasting. And we do that because we enjoy doing that. It's our pleasure to do that kind of activity. So for example, she goes to the gym and she feels very energized about it, and she knows that it's good for her health. That habit kept her going to the gym for the last 5 years.
Okay, so I'm thinking based on what you did here, you're probably between 3 and 4. I'm thinking maybe 23 points out of 30. I think it might be tough to get 26 based on what I just listened to. So I'm going to say 23 points out of 30. Let's listen to it one more time. I'm going to give you some
This
specific
lecture is
feedback.
mainly about two types of the motivation. The first
How about this lecture discusses, I think is stronger than is mainly about, and you're using fewer words.
one is extrinsic motivation, and the second one is intrinsic motivation.
How about this lecture discusses intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? Maybe that would be a lot more concise than what you said.
The first type, extrinsic motivation, is
The first type, according to the professor,
based on external feedback. We tend to praise other people to get accepted by them. The professor then gives
and I would be careful about using personal pronouns like we. This is a lecture, right? You're summarizing the lecture. So I think it's better to say the professor says that people might be motivated because of some external reward or praise, something like that, instead of using we.
the example of a child who does small jobs for that he or she
The,
does not enjoy doing just for receiving.
the professor gives the example of a child. I would put who does chores. I think chores is a good synonym for small jobs. So you're not using exactly the same words from the lecture. Let me go back a little bit more
Then
here.
gives the example of a child who does small jobs for that he or she does not enjoy doing just for receiving
It's a little bit awkward right in there.
small amount of money from their parents. So the
Instead of saying a small amount of money, you might say for receiving a small allowance. Allowance is a synonym for money. It means that parents are paying the child to do certain chores. We call this an allowance. So again, the depth of the vocabulary, you can probably do a little bit better with that. You tend to rely on the same words sometimes from the lecture. You want to show that you have good word choice. You can use synonyms that re-explain those important
The
points.
money is the motivation for them to keep doing the job. And this motivation does not last for long. The second one is intrinsic motivation, which is more long lasting. And we do that
So intrinsic motivation is more long lasting.
because we enjoy
I wouldn't say we do that. Professor explains that uh, people have this type of intrinsic motivation because
doing that. It's our pleasure to do that kind of activity. So, for example, she goes
it's a little bit awkward there. So the professor explains that people do this type of activity because of internal desires. For example, the professor explains that she goes to the gym not because of other people or because she's competing in a marathon, but because she just likes to go. It's something that she's internally motivated to do.
to the gym and she feels very energized about it, and she knows that it's good for her health.
She knows that it is good for her health. So you could probably package that last, when you talk about intrinsic motivation, I think you could have packaged that a little bit better.
That habit kept her going to the gym for the last 5 years.
All right, so let's do a recap now. So I've listened to it twice. I have some ideas I think can help you here. So here's some of my feedback. You did a good job organizing your response and addressing the key points of the lecture and reading. However, there are several areas to improve for a higher score. Unnecessary repetition. You repeated the idea of motivation multiple times in different ways. Try to be more concise and avoid restating the same point. This will help you use your time more efficiently. Word choice. Instead of saying small jobs, use chores to sound more natural and precise. I think I gave you another example of allowance instead of a small amount of money. Expanding your vocabulary make your speech more fluent and academic. Incomplete ideas. When discussing extrinsic motivation, you mentioned that children received allowances for chores, but you did not explain that extrinsic motivation may disappear once the rewards stop. So adding this detail would make your response more complete. Now, I might be wrong on that. Let me double check this one more time. Give me a second.
Child who does small jobs for that he or she does not enjoy doing just for receiving small amount of money from their parents. So the money is the motivation for them to keep doing the job. And this motivation does not last for long. The second one is
Okay, you more or less said that. So maybe 3, you can probably disregard that. Okay, so maybe this is not, I think we can say, okay, how about 3? Avoiding personal pronouns. In academic summaries, it is best to avoid we or you. And you're using we, I think. So instead, use neutral phrases like the speaker explains or the reading states to maintain an objective tone. 4, conciseness. Your explanation of intrinsic motivation was somewhat lengthy. Try to express ideas more directly. For example, instead of saying intrinsic motivation is when a person does something because they enjoy it and they don't need rewards, you could say intrinsic motivation comes from personal enjoyment, not external rewards. That's not exactly what you said, but it's an example of how you can make it more concise. So I think you're a little bit repetitive in certain parts of the response. Number 5, vocabulary depth and sentence variety. Your response could benefit from more varied vocabulary and sentence structures. Instead of repeating basic words like get or do or try, no, instead of saying words like get or do, try acquire, perform, carry out. Also, incorporating complex sentences will make your speech more sophisticated. Okay, 6, fluency issues. There were a few awkward pauses and unnatural phrasing. Practicing with a timer and recording yourself can help you become more comfortable with a smooth, continuous speech, but I think you're probably already doing that. So, how do you get better? Practice speaking concisely by summarizing main ideas in one or two sentences before expanding. Expand your vocabulary by reading and listening to academic materials. Try to use new words in your responses. Record yourself and listen for pauses or unnatural phrasing. Practice rephrasing sentences to sound more natural. All right, thank you for completing the practice test.